So this is part A of the KhoodeelaarTV television channel, coming to wherever you are, whoever is watching this, live on the internet, only on the internet from the, within quotation marks, United Kingdom. Not on satellite, not on terrestrial, and not on the cable news network, the cables networks. And the first piece, this is Sunday, the 9th of January 2022. And what we start with is the front page of the Daily and Sunday buying Boris Johnson grab. Bribing Boris Johnson grab, GRAB. It's obscenely shameless and disgustingly dishonest and corrupt. And this is the Sunday bribing and buying Boris Johnson grab, which has got on the top right hand side of the front page the shameless heading, which we partly edit: Boris Johnson to escape damaging flat makeover investigation. This is the criminal's boast. And in paragraph 2, it corruptly says Whitehall source. A Whitehall source, it can only be Boris Johnson source. Said number 10 was informed last week. Number 10, that is Boris Johnson's official address, number 10 Downing Street. The very address that the flat is in. A Whitehall source said number 10 was informed last week that Catherine Stone had melted. Well, it doesn't say had melted. That is our diagnostic phrase insert. So Catherine Stone, who polices the conduct of MPs, that is not true, because it was her report recommendation of 30 days suspension against Owen Paterson that Boris Johnson challenged and undermined, thus setting in motion the current cycle of allegations against Boris Johnson as a liar, as a sleazemonger, and a sleazy occupant. So reading that paragraph, second paragraph again, a Whitehall source said that number 10 was informed last week that Catherine Stone, who polices the conduct of MPs, and again we challenge that is not true, has decided not to open a fresh inquiry following separate investigations completed by the Electoral Commission and by Lord the Git, the independent advisor on ministers' interests. Now, that paragraph we have paraphrased heavily, including the name Git, because the Git is actually spelled G-E-I-D-T, and it is probably, the sound is probably Gee or gay, with an H sound at the end. But it is so near Git, G-I-T, Git, in the colloquial English, that in the context of the corruption by Git and corruption by Johnson himself continuing corruption by Johnson, we decided to pronounce it Git. And it is absolutely not independent advisor. Gate is not an independent advisor on ministers' interests. Now, there is a lot. All of this is about the law, legality, constitution, ethics, morality, rule of law, due process, etc. And what is happening in relation to this particular one that is festering? Boris Johnson's festering corruption about the redecoration of this flat at number 10 Downing Street is that there have been 10 separate investigations into how much was spent in the redecoration, who paid for the redecoration, and when was the payment made, what connection there existed between the person who paid the money and the Conservative Party or with Johnson himself, and how many times Johnson had been asked to give a straight answer and how many times he made how many excuses not to give answers, and so on. What this is doing is showing Boris Johnson exactly as the congenital liar, and his cabal, the so-called cabinet that he fronts, is coming across as corrupt as Johnson himself, because they are not kind of breaking ranks and they're not making a stand. They're not like Robin Cook. When BabyAngelGeronimo kind of decided to invade Iraq on a falsehood that BabyAngelGeronimo himself had invented, confected, Robin Cook resigned. So that was the clearest example of a member of the so-called cabinet disagreeing with an illegal action. And Robin Cook remains the only cabinet member to have done that in a very long time in this country. I mean, Claire Short, as we have said in a tweet, that Claire Short did stage a belated kind of stance that she was also against the anti-Iraq criminality committed by BabyAngelGeronimo. But her staging of this stunt came years later, years after BabyAngelGeronimo had done the illegality and the criminal attack on the people of Iraq. Just to check on the date when kind of Robin Cook and Claire Short did their expressions. So Robin Cook resigned Okay, Robin Cook resigned. You must resign on the 17th, I think, 17th of March. So this says in early 2003, Cook was reported to be one of the cabinet's chief opponents of military action against Iraq. And on 17th of March, he resigned from the cabinet. In a statement giving his reasons for resigning, he said, I can't accept collective responsibility for the decision to commit Britain now to military action in Iraq without international agreement or domestic support. And this entry says in the Wikipedia that he also praised BabyAngel's heroic efforts in pushing for the so-called second resolution regarding the Iraq disarmament crisis. But he, that is Cook, lamented the reality is that Britain is being asked to embark on a war without agreement in any of the international bodies of which we are a leading partner, not NATO, not the European Union, and now not the Security Council of the United Nations. So Cook's resignation speech in the House of Commons received an unprecedented standing ovation from some fellow MPs and was described by the BBC's Andrew Marr as without doubt one of the most effective, brilliant resignation speeches in modern British politics. Most unusually for the British Parliament, Cook's speech was met with growing applause from all sides of the House and from the public gallery. According to the Economist's obituary, that was the first speech ever to receive a standing ovation in the history of the House. So that is what Robin Cook did. I mean, despite there are various things about his personal life, his affair and his lying to his wife, etc., etc. But that is not what we are discussing. We are discussing Tony Blair's lying and the historic thing that is recorded here in the Economist's kind of report. There was no such standing ovation in the history of the House of Commons or House of Parliament. Now, that is hundreds of years old. Now, when it comes to integrity, morality, and ethics, that is how, bereft of morality and ethics, the House of Parliament has been. That is, if that is the only occasion in the history of the House, let's say the House of Commons, that there was a standing ovation, then that shows that for hundreds of years, over hundreds of years, the House of Commons has not seen, heard, or witnessed anything like that brilliant speech. Any speech. It's not just a resignation speech, any speech. Because it was the resignation speech that Andrew Marr is reportedly kind of recorded as having said about that. But The Economist said that it was in the history, it was the speech, only standing ovation in the history of the House. Think about the strength of the kind of appreciation, recognition, an agreement with what Robin Cook was saying and the principle that he set out as the reason for his resignation, which is topically now in January, 9th of January, 2022. Topically is absolutely compelling reference and argument in support of the demand that is now well over 1 million signatures strong for Brenda to withdraw her absolutely stupid knighthood on Tony Blair. Think about the strength of feelings against him, against his lying and illegality. Now, as can be accessed online and accessed on other publicly available sources, Tony Blair lied through his teeth, which in the context of the reference to the group of papers called the Telegraph, we have to point out, and I'm pointing it out, it's world exclusive diagnosis this. A recent article in the Guardian or on the Guardian suggested that one reason why Tony Blair refused to enact or bring about a legislation opposing police corruption and police dishonesty based on racism or police racism, according to the Guardian, not according to me, according to the Guardian, was that Blair or his advisor, so called, thought that if such a move against police racism or police dishonesty were to be taken to the stage of legislation, then the Daily, at that time, Daily Telegraph, would grab that kind of topic or that step or that move as a cause célèbre. And if the Daily Telegraph at that time in the 90s took that position, then it would damage the Labour Party, damage the Labour Party government. Now that is a lie, because no newspaper in Fleet Street, no media anywhere in the UK will come to the exception of the Observer, which published the poster supporting the Iraq war on Saturday, the 15th of February 2003, when we held and I was one of the people who attended the Hyde Park gathering, which variously has been described as being 2 million plus strong. And that too was the biggest such gathering in Hyde Park, in the history of Hyde Park. So you've got several historic events. Robin Cook's standing ovation in Parliament when he resigned and gave a resignation speech against the Blair illegal war on Iraq. That had never been seen before. That was the first standing ovation. And the Hyde Park gathering of the 15th of February 2003, which was attended by more than 2 million people opposing Blair's attack on Iraq. And this current petition, I think on the platform change.org, against Tony Blair being given knighthood, is exceeding, of course, more than 1 million signatures. Now, one of the British media's most overhyped, overplatformed racist criminals, Jeremy Clarkson, idiotically says that 1 million people have signed against Blair being given the knighthood, but 69 million haven't. How the expletive, the criminal, even dare to say that the 69 million should be counted here? Petitions by definition are signed by a small number of the population, logistical reasons and other reasons. And there is nothing in the record of petitions being treated as sufficiently democratically representative of the views of the public, even though they are only signed by hundreds of people, even thousands of people, hundreds of thousands of people, but never, ever are petitions considered to be part of the population as on the census, you moron. If that is the case, then how is it that Boris Johnson and no one else in the whole population is making most of the very significant decisions about hundreds of millions of pounds, billions of pounds. What is the lying racist criminal Jeremy Clarkson's response to that? Coming to lying criminal racist Jeremy Clarkson, his so-called enemy, Pierce Moron, has been threatening for the last 2 days with the help of the Dirty Diggers scum website that he's coming after, or he's going to start a new attack against Meghan Markle. That is the nearest to the crusade that the racists have been fighting. Now, there is no specific as to the contents of his threatened attack on or attacks on Meghan Markle. And it is quite clear that he is doing that as a columnist, about to be starting as a columnist on the scum. That is in addition to the huge platform that the dirty digger Murdoch has given him as the presenter or owner, de facto political owner of the new television channel that Murdoch is launching to complete the crusade against Meghan Markle. Now, what these morons don't understand is that every time they attack Meghan Markle and Harry, as they are, they make the royal family the subject of gossip, speculation, comment, criticism, and inquiry. So while they may be appearing to be attacking Meghan Markle and Harry, they're actually attacking the very royal family and its foundation. That is inevitably going to crack up, and that is going to collapse under the pressure of the controversy being created by the likes of Moron, Pierce Moron, and others, who think idiotically that they are attacking only Meghan Markle and there is nothing, no kind of consequences. There is no payback. That is to say, there is no response from the side of Meghan Markle or Harry. Now, obviously, Pierce Moron has forgotten how it came to be that he was sacked by the ITV television company, where he was abusing his platform as a co-host on the Good Morning Britain program, GMB program, by daily issuing lies and defamatory remarks and contemptuous words and phrases against Meghan Markle. Because the point came where he breached the line and he actually clearly attacked disabled people or people suffering from mental health issues, which was very cleverly grabbed hold of by Meghan Markle's lawyers and consultants and advisors and by herself. And they swiftly contacted the ITV executives and demanded action against Pierce Moron. And that was such a kind of plausible reason that ITV executives immediately saw that if they didn't sack Pierce Moron, then they would face a legal action, not just from Meghan Markle, but on behalf of the people who need care and support because of mental health issues. And such a wide-ranging kind of collection of potential kind of claimants against the ITV, that ITV company could not exist itself as a whole, let alone maintain the Good Morning Britain program slot. So they quickly and cleverly and correctly told Pierce Moron to leave, to resign, which he did. But as typical of the liar, moron, he disguised that sacking as if he himself had resigned. He had no option but to leave. So, what we are saying here is that the royal family will not be saved by this kind of propaganda, because it is widely known that it is this woman, Kate Middleton, who has been engineering the leaking and the gossip and so on against Meghan Markle to begin with. And it has been absolutely established that Brenda has been kind of reigning as a racist. Various documents that have been coming out, and they have been incontrovertibly showing evidence that the Brenda family, the so-called royal family, has been a racist family. Now, this woman, Kate Middleton, is being painted as if she's already the queen. That Brenda, Queen Elizabeth II, doesn't exist. That Brenda, Queen Elizabeth II, has gone, given up her kind of throne. And this is also the woman that is being painted as the personification of Diana as well. Now, Diana would be turning in her grave, because everything that Harry has been doing in the last, let's say, 3 years since he got involved with Meghan Markle, everything in terms of charity, in terms of public kind of good causes that Harry has been doing and Meghan has been doing, the two of them, would get 80% of the backing from Diana. And Diana would not be backing the behavior, the role that Kate Middleton has been playing. So that's the kind of first comment about the future of the monarchy. Look at page 3 of the Sunday bribing and buying Boris Johnson graph. It's full of promotion for this Kate Middleton. And there is no substance. There is no substance whatsoever. Now we shall leave the UK and go over to Kazakhstan. And Kazakhstan, which is part of Central Asia. If you look at the map of Central Asia, and if you look at Kazakhstan, you will see it's not far from Afghanistan, not far from Kyrgyzstan, not far from Tajikistan, not far from Uzbekistan. Notice the last four letters, Stan, which is not far from Pakistan. So at the beginning, when the name Pakistan was conceived, there was a controversy as to what was being meant by the name of the country Pakistan. And most of the people in the subcontinent that I came across during the debate, or the so-called debate, or the so-called controversy about the naming of the country, thought that it was an anti-East Pakistan kind of reason. They said that it was because the people who decided on the name Pakistan decided on a parochial anti-East Pakistan basis. That is absolute lies. Because Pakistan is part of about 7 or 8 countries called Stan, and Stan is land. It's nothing to do with a particular part of the land. The word means land. And the first three letters, P-A-K, and then followed by I. These are the words that actually have some credibility. One is Punjab, one is Afghanistan, although Afghanistan is outside of the territory, but Afghanistan has got complete ethnic mixture with the land that is now Pakistan. So Pakistan is Punjab, Afghanistan, and Kashmir. And then they go back south to Sindh. But also the I means the Indus, the river Indus. So Punjab, which is 5 rivers. Punjab is a word that means 5 rivers, the 5 rivers that make up the region of Punjab. And I is the Indus. That is the area that is known as Sindh, but it is Indus Valley. Historically, the Indus Valley. So if you look at all these components, then you see that East Pakistan was not included in that name, quite apart from the Stan, which we have explained. East Pakistan has, although geographically in terms of scale, much smaller than the scale of what is West Pakistan, what is now Pakistan, that was West Pakistan at the time. East Pakistan has got at least 10 different kind of nationalities, because it is surrounded by what is now Burma or the Myanmar, and the people of Rohingya, the Rohingya people, and the Chakmas and the other nationals in the southeast. And in the north and northwest of Bangladesh, there are several nationalities. And of course, Sylhet is a nation in terms of the descriptions. And then Sylhet itself has got the Manipuris and others. So none of those people, none of those nationalities, and none of those identities are present if you look at the name Pakistan. Well, forget about the last one that has common kind of last name with 8 other countries in the Central Asia. So you've got Punjab, you've got Afghanistan, you've got Kashmir, and you've got Indus Valley. That is Sindh included, yeah? So why there was no inclusion of any part of what is now Bangladesh, but at that time it was Pakistan, East Pakistan? That is something that we shall investigate further based on this introduction, contextual introduction. Now let's go to Central Asia and land right on the soil of Kazakhstan. Now Kazakhstan, according to this particular edition of the Sunday Buying and Bribing Boris Johnson graph, is returning to the orbit of Russia, Kremlin. Now, to what extent that happens is another matter, but that's what the bribing and buying Sunday Boris Johnson graph is claiming. We shall put that on one side for the time being, and we move fast into the area that David Neuberger boasted about in July 2017. Now remember who David Neuberger is. David Neuberger now, in 2022 calendar year, is a former president of the UK's so-called Supreme Court. I say so-called because the word Supreme Court is actually contemporaneously, it is actually borrowed from the USA, where the Supreme Court has been playing a real supreme role compared to any other Supreme Court in any other stable, within quotes, country. Because the Supreme Court actually in the USA decides on key constitutional disputes, and the Supreme Court decisions then become kind of stoppable. Any decision made by the Supreme Court in the USA about any public issue then becomes the law. Not the case in any other country, and especially not in the hugely populous, the huge demography, which is 1.5 kind of billion people in India. Now, as we posted earlier in the day, the abuse of the Supreme Court, abuse of the court system in the Indian context is not something that can be compared with the role of the USA Supreme Court, and I'll come to that in a minute. Constitutionally, factually, ethically, evidentially, and democratically. In India, Narendra Modi and his far right RSS, they actually apply the fascistic control over the Supreme Court, which they use as a rubber stamp. The only difference between the Supreme Court acting as a rubber stamp and any kind of so-called department in Modi's so-called administration acting as a corrupt wing of Modi's kind of narrative and agenda is that the Supreme Court, by that name, carries the kind of plausibility that can be used to hoodwink and mislead and brainwash the majority of the population. And so therefore every day, let's say every sitting day in India, the Supreme Court does something to enhance the claim of Narendra Modi and the BJP and the RSS and the Shiv Senas. Because although the Shiv Senas, the soldiers of Shiva, and the RSS, which is the Rashtriya Sham Shabak Sangha, although there are some technical differences between the RSS and the Shiv Sena, essentially they follow the same ideology, the same aims of Brahmita. The Brahmin fundamentalism or Hindutva based on Hinduism. Now, India is a Hindu majority country numerically, but India is not a Hindu only country. And looking at the Western news outlets, Reuters, AFP, Associated Press, and others, Western, European, and the North American, because they are the ones that have got the highest number of subscribers in Asia, in Africa. Because there is nothing in Asia, there is nothing in Africa that remotely rivals in terms of the market, rivals any of these agencies and operations. So the agenda that these news outlets kind of follow influences the perception of the world's majority of people seeking news access and news outlets and looking at the news. That is how powerful in brainwashing these outlets are. So that is how important it is to diagnose the built-in inherent corruption, lying, racism, imperialistic messages coming from the Western media, because Again, like the news agencies, the Western printed media like the Fleet Street and their counterparts in New York, for example, and in Chicago, the narrative is the same. Say, for example, somebody in the last decade, as part of the conversation, asked me, or the issue was raised in a conversation between myself and Annetta Pedretti, who is now deceased. And Annetta Pedretti was wondering if I, Muhammad Haque, kind of spoke French and understood French. It wasn't about language, but it was about the role of the media. Because I was telling her, and anyone else who might have been present during the discussion, that the agenda of the French daily Le Monde and that of the Guardian and that of the, let's say, New York Tribune or New York Times, not Tribune, the agenda generally was the same. And Annetta Pedretti said to me, "How do you know that?" I said, "Of course, I study the world and I study the outlets contextually. Because if I didn't do that and had to rely on my access to each and every language in which the media appeared or published or kind of did their business, then I would have to learn to speak and read hundreds and hundreds of languages, which is not practicable. So I have devised over a long period, a contextual approach to what the media do, regardless of whether I have particular literally linguistic access to, say, the Italian language or the Greek language or even Turkish language. But if you give me a Turkish language paper, I can contextually work out the main thesis, the main narrative that they are promoting, which is how I consider the contents of the printed media. And the same goes for the online versions as we currently have. So, going back to Kazakhstan and looking at the daily bribing and buying, Boris Johnson graph's Sunday equivalent, the Sunday buying, bribing Boris Johnson graph, it has got on page, it's an inside page, so it's page 15, a spread under the heading Kazakh despot's daughter with a 220 million fortune in London spree. Now that is the picture they have published, whether it's a file picture or it's a current picture, we shall come to see in a minute. So that's the headline, or that's the heading, not the headline, because it is 4 lines long. And it says, about her picture, it says, Aliya Nazarbayeva, top and below. And where is the below? Oh, below is the Kazakhs queue for cash at a bank in the capital. Now, she's not described about the picture here as to when the picture was taken. Her name again is Nazarbayeva. It's a language in Kazakhstan that has been twisted and shaped by the Russian language, the Russian linguistic kind of framework. Over 70 years of Russian influence directly exerted on the Kazakhs. The Kazakhs are Central Asian people and the Kazakhstan and all the other stans are mainly Muslim populated. And I shall check again to see if that is correct. So, what they are saying is a piece by Patrick Sauer, or Sauer, Sawer. It says the house in Britain, private jet, and even a bank were paid for with cash from the country's beset by protest. Now look at this. Now she is the daughter of the former, and I'll come to that, former president of Kazakhstan, whose name is given here in a way that is not correct in linguistic terms, but I shall pronounce it correctly. Nur Sultan. Persian, Arabic mixture there. Persian, Arabic, Persian. Nur Sultan Nazarbayev, the self-styled leader of the nation, still commands Vladimir Putin's support. So that is in accordance with the heading that they have put there, that Kazakhstan and Belarus are moving into Kremlin's orbit. So let's see what Nur Sultan Nazarbayev's daughter has been up to. The daughter of the former president of strife-torn Kazakhstan went on a spending spree in London after moving $300 million, that is 220 million pounds, of her personal wealth out of the country. Now, they don't say what personal wealth means, but we shall move on. The next paragraph. Alia Nazarbayeva instructed two financial advisors to buy palatial homes, a private bank, and a luxury jet after transferring the money into offshore trusts and companies from Liechtenstein to the British Virgin Islands. Notice the occurrence of the word British. Her purchases included a $25 million Challenger Bombardier private jet, and 8.7 million pounds, they're shifting between dollar and pound, 8.7 million pound house in Highgate, North London. Highgate is also not far of the location of the grave of Charles Marx, that is Karl Marx. Meant to help her obtain British residency, and instructing her team to buy a $14 million worth of property in Dubai. Details of the 206 spending spree revealed today are likely to raise eyebrows in Kazakhstan, which last week was hit by violent protests aimed at the country's increasingly maligned elite. Alia is the youngest daughter of Nur Sultan Nazarbayev, who was president for 28 years until 2019, when he took a backseat but controversially retained much of his power. During his tenure, a small minority amassed enormous wealth, while many ordinary Kazakhs struggled to get by. Nur Sultan quit as head of the Kazakh Security Council on January 5, only 4 days ago, and was reportedly preparing to leave the country. Authorities yesterday, that is Saturday, insisted Mr. Nazarbayev was in the capital. He hadn't left the country. Kazakh media also reported that Karim Masimov, a former prime minister of Kazakhstan, had been arrested for treason and plotting a coup and treason and for plotting a coup. That sentence in the Sunday buying Boris Johnson graph is not correct. So I have corrected it in my reading. So read again. Mr. Nazarbayev's spending spree came to light. Miss Nazarbayev's spending spree came to light when she fell out with the two financial advisors, accusing them, that is the financial advisors, of dishonesty, misrepresentation of funds, conspiracy to defraud, breaches of fiduciary duty, and unjust enrichment. Now, this is criminality beyond any available existing words can describe. How dash this criminal, daughter of the criminal president, even think of accusing any of the other people of these wrongs? She is the worst wrongdoer in the context, on the facts. She has been. Now remember 2006. Remember 2006 was very much the last year, but very much the year when Tony B. Liar was in post as the incumbent at number 10 Downing Street. And 6 years before that, which is year 2000, he he grinned. He grinned with pleasure and satisfaction as he greeted the crook, Nur Sultan Nazarbayev. 2000, he received Nur Sultan Nazarbayev, the crook. And after he left, that is, Tony Blair left in 2007, under pressure from a disgruntled and very frustrated Gordon Brown, who got less than half of the number of years in power that Tony Blair had. Tony Blair set about reaping the harvest of his investment. So Tony Blair must have contacted Nur Sultan Nazarbayev immediately after he left. That is, Tony Blair left the post of Prime Minister of the UK, because Nazarbayev, as this particular piece records, was president for 28 years, almost 3 times as long as the entire Blair-fronted Labour Party was in post since 1997. So it goes on about Alia Nazarbayev, Nazarbayev's daughter, Alia Nazarbayeva. That is the B, and A is the indicative of the feminine gender or feminine sex. Miss Nazarbayeva claimed she transferred $312 million of her personal wealth out of the country after advisors told her it would be dangerous to keep her fortune there. Now, her personal wealth, what do they mean by that? They never say where she got that personal wealth at all. Documents lodged with the High Court, that must have been lodged in the last few days, not yesterday, Saturday, but during the week. So documents lodged with the High Court include claims that Kazakh wealth manager Malik Ishmuratov told her that Miss Nazarbayeva was a politically exposed person. In 2006, Miss Nazarbayeva confided to Mr. Ishmuratov that she had sold some shareholdings, receiving approximately $325 million. Mr. Ishmuratov went on to introduce Ms. Nazarbayeva to Denis Denis Korotkov Koganovich, a Kazakh wealth manager based in London. In 2008, Mr. Ishmuratov advised Ms. Nazarbayeva to set up the Alsara Foundation in Liechtenstein. By 2008, Ms. Nazarbayeva agreed orally with Mr. Ishmuratov to entrust an initial $150 million capital to him, and Mr. Korotkov Kognovich, not Kognovich, but Koganovich, transferring the cash to a company registered in the BVI, that is British Virgin Islands, the first of several transfers, eventually totaling $312 million. But when Miss Nazarbayeva's relationship with the pair broke down, she lodged a 116 million no she lodged a 165 million pound claim against them in London in March 2016. The claim was settled in a confidential agreement. While there is no suggestion that Ms. Nazarbayeva's money was acquired unlawfully, now there they acknowledge that it could be acquired unlawfully. Commentators say the revelations raise questions about the way her wealth was moved out. Well, not only are there questions about the way her wealth was moved out, questions primarily must be raised and answers sought to them as to how she got the money, how she got the shares in the first place. What shares did she buy? How many did she buy? And what was the difference between the time when she bought the shares and the time that the shares were valued at the time she got the so-called shares sold? Now there is Tom Main, a visiting fellow at Chatham House. Chatham House is a UK state spying operation. It's called a Chatham House, but it's actually Chatham House is part of the UK state secrecy and spying operation. So this description of him as a visiting fellow is completely dishonest and corrupt by the Sunday buying and bribing Boris Johnson grab. So Tom Main, a visiting fellow at Chatham House, said, "The amount of money is staggering. This case shows how the UK is often used as a safe haven for this kind of money." Now, even this man is acknowledging there is no way that this woman, this daughter of the Nur Sultan Nazarbayev, genuinely had the skills or the knowledge or the expertise to genuinely earn hundreds of millions of dollars worth. So Miss Nazarbayev, they're acknowledging in the right at the end of this piece, Miss Nazarbayeva did not respond to a request for comment. A spokesman for Mr. Ishmuratov and Mr. Korotkov Koganovich said the unfounded allegations were denied and an amicable settlement was reached. So, where is the actual reference, the latest contemporary reference to any of the Kazakh persons? Let's see if there is any reference in the current time. So this is only 3 hours ago. It's the Daily Mail, yes? So this is Daily Mail website, not the Daily Mail printed version yet, because it's only 3 hours ago. So the printed version will have some kind of version. But this is something based on the the Sunday buying and bribing Boris Johnson graph. So here is the piece that is first published at 14:09 hours GMT today, updated as 15:50 GMT today, which is not long ago. So 3 hours ago. It was updated only 3 hours ago, because it's now 15:53, so 3 hours and 3 minutes ago. Alia Nazarbayeva moved $300 million of personal wealth out of Kazakhstan. She then went on spending spree, acquiring North London home and private jet. Spending has come to light after Miss Nazarbayeva fell out with financial advisors. She lodged a £165 million claim in London, accusing them of conspiracy to defraud. Spending comes amid violent protests in Kazakhstan over family's wealth. Now, that is a lie, because she didn't do that in the recent days. So, the Daily Mail, the Mail Online, is stupid. They have not read the article that is carried in the daily and Sunday buying and bribing Boris Johnson group. It says that the spending spree took place 15 years ago, 2006. And they're saying now the spree, which also included the acquisition of a $14 million property in Dubai, took place in 2006. So if they have read that and if they're admitting that it took place in 2006, how is it that they are heading the last description of the five lines? The last line reads, spending comes amid violent protests in Kazakhstan over family's wealth. It does not come amid the violent protests. What it does is that news of the spending spree 15 years ago comes amid violent protests in Kazakhstan over the family's wealth. So anyone who hasn't watched this program before, this program is called World Exclusive Diagnosis of Fleet Street. And this is the latest diagnostic work that we have done world exclusively. Something that happened 15 years ago, they are referring to as happening now. How can that be? So you cannot trust, you cannot rely on the Daily Mail or the scum or most of Fleet Street. And it does acknowledge that the reports are first carried in this daily Sunday buying and bribing Boris Johnson graph. Let's see what this is the picture that the grinning liar, BabyAngelGeronimo, received this crook from Kazakhstan on November 16, 2000. This is the investment meeting he was having. What it means is that BabyAngelGeronimo was meeting Nur Sultan Nazarbayev in November 2000, as part of the investment, because once he would be out, that is, Bilayar would be out of number 10 Downing Street, he would then go to Kazakhstan and reap the harvest of this investment, which is what has been happening. Because Tony Bilayar is a multi-millionaire, if not a billionaire already. Because it would not surprise me if he has got in the British Virgin Islands and other offshore locations hundreds of millions secretly hidden. And they will only come out after he's gone or something, or his children have inherited. One of his sons is a multimillionaire. So she sold the shareholdings, some shareholdings, which means she still has got other shareholdings. And the some shareholdings she referred to having sold in 2006 were worth $325 million. How much more has she got? And what are those shares in? And how did she get hold of those shares? Who gave her the shares? Because there is no reference to anything to do with her actually doing any work or any business, genuine business, common to ordinary people, that could earn her that much money. Now, according to the entry about Kazakhstan, Kazakhstan is a Central Asian country and former, it is looks like on the initial kind of, now look how many stans are there. There is Kazakhstan, there is Uzbekistan, there is Kyrgyzstan, Turkmenistan. So let's look at the stans. Turkmenistan and Azerbaijan are kind of separated by a kind of sea. And then to the north of Turkmenistan is Uzbekistan. To the north of Uzbekistan is Kazakhstan. To the east of Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan is Kyrgyzstan. And to the east of Turkmenistan is Tajikistan. And Tajikistan is to the north of Afghanistan. And Afghanistan is to the north and northeast of Pakistan. So these are the stans. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There must be another number of stans that are not appearing, but it will appear. So these are the Central Asian countries, which means that Pakistan geographically is very much a part of Central Asia. Pakistan that is now, not the East Pakistan that was included in the state name, but not the state geography, along with what then was West Pakistan. So the Central Asian countries are kind of bordered by the Russian, still the remnant of Russia. So let's go back to Kazakhstan and look at the actual population. So the population, according to the 2020 census, is 18.7 million, 75 million. So that's it's 19 million or thereabouts. And yesterday, the former intelligence chief of Kazakhstan was arrested on suspicion of treason. And today, Kazakhstan has detained, today, that is Sunday, the 9th of January 2022, Kazakhstan has arrested 6,000 people in security forces crackdown. 6,000, most of them are protesters. Kazakhstan anti-government protests, 164 people killed and 5,900 detained. That is the Sky News 4 hours ago. But according to the Financial Times, there is no death kind of data, only the 6,000 number that the Financial Crimes is recording. And 23 minutes ago, in the Wall Street Journal, there is a, let's say, updated kind of line that is included in the heading in the Sunday buying and bribing Boris Johnson graph, which means Kazakhstan and Belarus moving into Kremlin's orbit. That has been updated in the Wall Street Journal in the heading, "Is the crisis in Kazakhstan the rebirth of the Soviet Union?" That is 23 minutes ago. That is just 5:45 local time. That is 17:45 hours GMT today. So only 23 minutes ago. And the Guardian is saying 38 minutes earlier that Kazakhstan says 164 people were killed in a week of unrest. And the Daily Mail, 48 minutes ago, Daily Mail Online, saying the Kazakhstan denies US funded biolaboratory was seized by protesters as deaths rise. So Kazakhstan is very much in the middle of a deadly movement, whether it is all genuine or whether it has been driven by Russia, as the Wall Street Journal and the Telegraph group here kind of suggest. And there are some people who have been commenting on the Daily Mail piece, saying that the connection with Tony Blair is significant. And there are contradictory claims and counterclaims and assurances, because the Daily Mail Online is reporting that Kasim Zumat Tokayev's office said the situation in the country has stabilized and authorities have regained control of administrative buildings which had been occupied by protesters. Now, that is a lie, because the stability that this particular statement claims must have been secured by murdering people, mass murder, massacre. They are saying 164 people, but you cannot be certain that it's only 164. It must have been hundreds of people who have been massacred in order to terrorize and intimidate the rest into, let's say, retreat. And there is a picture of guns allegedly confiscated by the army and the police from protesters, almost 6,000 of whom have been detained. Now let's go back to David Neuberger and the reference that I made to Supreme Court, the status of the Supreme Court. Some who have not been paying attention to all of the broadcasts may have missed the point about David Neuberger that I made. Remember the world exclusive diagnoses that we carry out in these editions is about the contents, the role of Fleet Street media, and by extension, that is to say, by repeating the same kind of principle, the same agenda, the same principle in terms of policy, we can include the role of the BBC, the Sky News, and other broadcasting outlets. And we can say factually safely, in terms of factual accuracy or consistency, that the media in Britain, Fleet Street and the broadcasting counterparts or of Fleet Street, carry out a narrative, carry out an agenda that suits the political interests of the state for a start. And secondly, political interests. Secondly, but more importantly, the political agenda and narrative of big business. The big business dictates the policy of the government, and the policy of the government is kind of replicated or converted into propaganda pieces by the media. Fleet Street, for example. Now here we say David Neuberger. Martin Bentham. So when we search for a particular piece, the more kind of concepts we include in the search terms, the faster it is to locate the particular item, and the first attempt it comes up. The heading in the evening, No Standards website, to the piece dated the 4th of July 2017. The main heading reads, Brexit could boost London's status as world's legal center. Now, remember in this piece, Neuberger reportedly said, remember what he said about this is a crucial kind of sentence. He said that once British judges were left to our own common law devices, they would be able to react more quickly and freely to developments in our fast changing world. Now that was supposed to be a first, that is to say, a statement that was being made for the first time. Of course, the Supreme Court was a new one at that time in 2006. But the fast changing world was not changing at all in 2006. It was completely kind of like old, unchanging world in the sense that nothing was possible to be linked with the UK's international status in terms of law and legal disputes, etc., in 2006, because it was a good 10 years before the Brexit kind of referendum took place, which means that nobody could even anticipate a Brexit in 2006, because 2006 was still the period when Tony Blair was incumbent in number 10 Downing Street. So that the prospect of the UK becoming a member of the, not remaining a member of the European Union, didn't exist. The concept wasn't there. Because until dodgy Dave Cameron made the sudden and abrupt announcement that there would be a referendum about the UK staying in the European Union, politically there was no speculation that there was going to be a referendum. Of course, there had been for many years a call in one form or another for a referendum or for a kind of process whereby the continuing membership of the European Union by the UK was going to be discussed and decided. So, whatever it was, 2006 was never a period when our fast changing world, as David Neuberger reportedly put it, was going to be treated in any different way by the London based judicial bureaucracy. So Neuberger was lying. If we look at the date and the time of this spree that Aliya Nazarbayeva kind of indulged in, then we can see that this kind of criminality by using London was already going on for years. So Neuberger was being dishonest and factually incorrect, because he was saying that there was this wonderful prospect of our judges. What is he saying in that piece, that stupid piece? Lord Neuberger, Lord is within quotation mark. Every time we say Lord in any narrative, any quotation, it must be deemed that as far as we are concerned, it is a peer or a lord. The spelling is within quotation marks. Neuberger, the president of the Supreme Court, said that once British judges were left to our own common law devices, that once meaning as soon as Brexit was done. That is what once is referred to. Once, as soon as Brexit is done. But that was a lie, because Nur Sultan's daughter, Aliya, was already doing things by using the British court, like High Court, as a prostitute court as far back as between 2006 and the years that followed, when she fell out with her two so-called advisor, co-crooks. And as I've said, this piece by Martin Bentham in the Evening Nostandard Standard refers to the supposed so-called criticism by Neuberger of the, it says, Labour's 1999 Access to Justice Act. Now, that access to justice typically was a denial of access to justice act for the many. And the fact that somebody, a multimillionaires crook from our fast changing world, could be using the High Court to lodge the claims against these two former advisors shows that things were not changing, and things did not have to change. Did not have to change for London based courts bureaucracy to continue to play its prostitution role for multimillionaire crooks from our fast changing world, that is, our international kind of clients. And according to Martin Bentham, who is a spy and part of the kind of rubber stamping media outlets, rubber stamping the UK state's agenda, he says, Martin Bentham says in the Evening Standard, his most striking comments, however, were on Brexit. Some have warned that leaving the European Union could harm London's ability to retain its position as the world's primary center for dispute resolution and lead to a reduction in the billions of pounds a year that the capital's legal services generate for the economy. Neuberger, who was speaking in London to Australian lawyers, insisted that any risks could be overcome. He added, Brexit does not alter the fact that lawyers and judges in the UK are as internationally minded and expert as they ever have been. Brexit is operating as a spar to encourage all involved in the provision of legal services in London to strive to ensure that those services are even better than they already are. That is a complete lie. Because all the narrative about the law by Brexiteers has been and remains focused against the international legal implications and focused against the UK's status as a country which has got any human rights obligations or legislation. Rhetoric against the European Union, against the European Union's membership of the UK, continued membership of the UK, or the rhetorics reflecting that is retrospective rhetoric about the UK being in the EU in the legal context still persist in referring to the adverse impact on Little England that international status of the UK entailed and kind of represented. So Kazakh despot's daughter with a 220 million fortune in London spree, this heading belongs 15 years ago. If the daily buying and bribing Boris Johnson graph were doing the due diligence and doing investigative reporting, then they would have actually come across that spending spree, but they didn't. So imagine how many billions of pounds and dollars worth of clandestine spending sprees are taking place every single week in this country. The sprees being done by corrupt, dishonest, fraudulent owners of surreptitiously obtained, corruptly obtained wealth from around the world, and especially various parts of the so-called former Soviet Union. So when Neuberger says, whatever Martin Bentham corruptly reported him as saying was a lie. So who will investigate or diagnose, like we are doing? We are investigating, examining the contents of the utterances by the likes of David Neuberger. Who, in what platform, recognizable by the state and the public, and reported by truthfully and honestly and fully reported by the Fleet Street media. Who will be doing that? Apart from us, of course. We are doing it for sharing knowledge internationally, objectively with the whole world, whoever is watching it in whatever part of the world. But essentially, this kind of criminality has been going on for years, for decades. And Neuberger was wrong. Neuberger was lying again. And this Sunday buying and bribing Boris Johnson graph is not talking about the many in Little England. The Little Englanders, the hoodwinked and the gullibles, think that their kind of rights and their dreams and their ambitions will be met by the end, delivered by the cabal fronted by Boris Johnson, or the cabal that is aided and abetted by the likes of David Frost. Now, here is a piece that actually does support the idea of single-sex schools. This is a piece by Sophia Moneycoats, and she is against single-sex school in this piece. Why am I referring to this? Because of the role that I played in keeping one school, girls' school, single-sex, from attacks by the lying Inner London Education Authority crooks and their colluders, the London Borough of Tower Hamlets, the Crooks Council, in 1987. I spent months of my life doing a single person campaign to protect the Mulberry School from being merged with the boys coming there. And how much is it worth, what I did? It is immeasurable. It cannot be counted by millions. It is a lot more, worth a lot more. Even if they had £100 million available, they could not overturn the merger of that school into a mixed sex school. So I intervened, and as part of the kind of ABCD, A to Z, let's say, A to Z of the campaigns that I've been mobilizing and organizing in defending the community. I came in without any notice because I was not aware of, I didn't have a child at the Mulberry School. So therefore, I would not be party to any consultation. One parent who had a child at the Mulberry School was somebody who supplied me newspapers. And he showed me the letter that he as a parent had received from the Mulberry School. And he asked me for advice. And I was very, very brief, and I was very clear to him. I said, I cannot give you any advice at all. He said, why? You are advising everyone. all the time, but why not me? I said, it is not that I don't want to advise you. I know that if I give you an advice, you won't be able to carry it out. So I want to give you advice that you can carry out, and there is no advice that I can give you that you will be able to carry out, because it involves your spending months on foot. After whatever length of time of discussion, he agreed. And that parent and myself set about going to collect signatures to a petition that I had written, arguing against the merger plan. Now, there are two such events that took place in Tower Hamlets between 1987 and 1995. Now, this is Sophia Manikut's supporting the single-sex school, and we shall leave it there for the time being, the details, because the principle is well understood and clarified and clearly set out. Now, the other school is, of course, the same school. The name has been changed. The same school that these four girls were kind of groomed. These girls were not there when I defended the school in 1994-95. This used to be called the Dainford School when I campaigned to keep that school a single-sex boys' school. The Mulberry School campaign I did was to keep the Mulberry School single-sex girls' school. In the case of the Dainford School, I campaigned to keep the school single-sex boys' school. Now, if the school had been allowed to remain a single-sex boys' school, these girls would never be brainwashed at all or groomed there, because the suspicion is widely held suspicion is that most of their brainwashing took place outside of their homes. So part of that was done from the Sisters Forum based in the East London Mosque in Whitechapel Road, and the rest of it was done through their connections through the school, the Bethnal Green School that it became by the time these girls were there. Because when we did the campaign to keep the school single-sex boys' school, the girls had not been even born. So we were preparing, that is myself and my colleagues, whoever was there with me, we were preparing to safeguard the platform for these girls to safely do their schooling and away from the influence of contamination by all kinds of things that happened with the mixing of the school status as a mixed sex school. We shall talk more about the two schools, and we shall do that as part of the A to Z of the campaigns. No matter how many times or how many entries under each alphabetical entry there may be. So what happened in the campaign to keep the Mulberry School single sex? So we spent hours every single day, and we approached parents on the list of the parents of girls that were attending, were on the roll of that school at that time. And some of the parents, some of the doors that we knocked on, some of the parents produced this stupid response. They asked, "What is in it for you? Why are you doing this?" Now it's not Lilliput. It's several stages lower than the Lilliputians. That is the stage. They had children, that obviously girls attending that school, and yet they had no concept as to voluntary work, ethical work, non-profit, non-careerist, educational, enlightening, moral, ethical work that I was doing. I always had been doing. Where to begin? The answer. How do you give the answer to such a question? What is in there for you? Now, I come from a background. My great-grandfather in the kind of during the 18th and the 19th and the 20th century, my great-grandfather was probably the only person from that whole region who went to Central Asia on foot. And he went to Central Asia as part of his educational philanthropic work. And in addition to being an leading educationist of his generation in the whole area, he was also a spiritual leader. That is to say, people treated him as a source of the spiritual advice and opinion. And in his philanthropic, spiritual, educationalist, and educator, my great-grandfather educated countless numbers of people. It cannot be counted as 1,000 or thousands. In his lifetime, in his years as the educational leader, educationist, at home and in the countries in Central Asia and on the way, en route, he educated any number of people. And as a philanthropist, he helped any number of people. And as a spiritualist, he advised and guided any number of people. Now, by any criteria of reward and remuneration, he could have been, in terms of measure, the equivalent owner of equivalent wealth that is owned by today's billionaires, multi-billionaires. And as I've said before, many of the people would come from all parts of when he was at home, because he didn't stay home long, but when he was at home, after each of his long journeys to Central Asia, people would come from all parts of the kind of region who knew about his being at home. And people would say to him various stories about what kind of blessings, what kind of prayers they needed, what kind of healing wishes they needed for their loved ones that needed healing from various ailments, sicknesses, and diseases. And as it turned out, as reported to me by my grandmother, my father's mother, who was the one that saw him when she was a child and a young woman, because she came from not far from she came from a village next to ours, so she knew about him by reputation, etc., etc. And then when she was older and got married to his son, my grandfather, my grandmother became more aware about his contributions, his work, and his kind of depth and the numbers of the people that visited him. So the people came back after the initial contraction consultations to say to him that his consultation and prayers had worked and their loved ones had recovered from their ailments, illnesses, other discomfort that they were complaining about. So when they did that, when they came back to report the outcome and the result of his blessings, prayers, advice, they wanted to show their appreciation. They wanted to thank him in kind, not just tell him that they have been blessed with a remedy and that their loved ones have recovered. Sometimes the people who themselves were ill came and wanted to thank him for his help. And they said, please tell us what will please you, what can we give you, what can we offer you. And my great grandfather, who is known mainly by his, let's say, by reference to his role as a spiritual person, Ved Shah. So they would ask Ved Shah, please tell us, what can we offer you? And he would say nothing. His answer was, you cannot offer me anything. I don't want anything. So it went on thousands and thousands of times. People say, what can we offer you? Now, if you imagine, it's a part of Silot, which has got our house or our kind of homestead or our place where I grew up, was next to a field which is now getting overcrowded and completely disappearing under the huge sprawling numbers of houses and homes being built. But at that time it was a haur or a kind of open space only for agricultural kind of activities. And so many times multiplied by many times that size, people would come and say, tell us what size, what area of land would you like? And Beth Shah would say, no area, no land, nothing. You cannot offer me any material gains, any material rewards. I give you what I give you in expectation of nothing, except in expectation of the blessing and the remedy and the healing. So he did that. And according to the account given to me by my grandmother, he did that thousands and thousands of times to thousands and thousands of people. Now, as I said, if the material rewards or material returns or token of kind of appreciation, the people he had helped, if they were counted together, then the currency value of all of that, or even parts of those offered wealth, would exceed the wealth of Jeff Bezos, exceed the wealth of Mark Zuckerberg, or Elon Musk, or Bill Gates. But he didn't. He didn't accept a single kind of equivalent to a penny. So I am the kind of great grandson, my grandmother told me, because she saw him. So she was telling me that I resembled him in many ways. I mean, I didn't see him, and there was no photograph that I could see, nor any written records. And my grandmother said to me repeatedly as I was growing up under her kind of care and influence that I had so many things common to him. And the other thing she said about eating the meat eating and eating meals, she said that he would never fill his stomach with food at mealtime. He would always remain kind of partly incomplete in the food that he ate. And there are other things that she said about him. And she said that you are his great grandson. Now, I couldn't say any of these to any of these people that I was knocking the doors of. But that was me. Now, little did they know, they had no idea who I was or what background I came from, or what upbringing I had. But that's the person who was knocking on the doors of people who thought that I was doing the knocking because I wanted some money or I wanted some benefit or reward for my work, quite independently of the background of my great grandfather. In my own earlier years, I have been offered more opportunities, more career spots and jobs and positions than I can count, and I have said no. It's not something that somebody said to me to do. I didn't say no because somebody asked me to say no. It is against the criteria, against the measurement, against the yardstick of my principles that I would not join anyone doing anything that was dishonest, corrupt, or detrimental to the rights of the people, rights of society. Well, that's me. So when I go to the doors of parents of the Mulberry School girls in 1987, asking them to sign the petition that was to oppose the merging of the Mulberry School with the boys, they asked me, what is there for you in it? There could not be anything for me in it, because there existed nobody, there does exist nobody in Tower Hamlets that would do what I did and what I do. Because everyone does something, whatever it is that they do, in return for something. I don't do that in return for any something that can be measured by money, wealth, connection, or other gratification or satisfaction. I do what I do for the principle. Now, if I do anything for the principle, then it's very difficult for those who believe in material returns and material justification and interest. They can't match this. One of the reasons why any number of selfish, limited individuals would find any kind of excuse to kind of undermine what I do. And when they search and they find no material reasons or evidence to undermine, they get very frustrated. Now, this woman, Sophia Manikurts, is a right winger, of course. But on this point about girls and boys single sex school, she is absolutely spot on. Sophia Money Codes. And we shall be posting on the Twitter account, the Khoodeelaar Twitter account, this particular item, so that anyone visiting can get a full read of this article. So, going back to the petition that we successfully mounted, I mounted and concluded in opposing the merger of the single sex Mulberry School into a mixed sex school. One of the things that happened after that attack was removed was that the school began to focus on the girls' schooling. I wouldn't call it education because there is a lot of education that is not available in the schools, whatever the status of the school. But had it been a mixed school, it would have been a disaster. Because those four girls from the mixed sex former Danford school were only able to be kind of led astray because the school didn't have an integrity about the boys' school, boys being kind of focused on their schooling in a way that the boys cannot be focused if they are attending a mixed sex school. There is no way to know how many of the four girls, Bethnal school girls, that went to Syria or were groomed to go to Syria were led astray partly by their being exposed to boys. There is no way of knowing, despite the fact that many of the reports about what Shamima Begum said as her motive, including one suggestion that she went there because she was sexually kind of frustrated. I mean, this is something very difficult to establish because when she went to Syria in February 2015, which is 7 calendar years ago, there was no way of knowing at that stage anyway, there was no way of knowing that she had experienced any particular experience in relationship contacts with boys. And there are other things that I could tell about keeping the Mulberry School safe from a mixed sex kind of environment. Because before that particular plot to merge the school with boys, there were about 2 or 3 years in the life of the Mulberry School girls, which were dominated by mainly Bangladeshi teenagers loitering with intent around the peripheries of the school, waiting for girls to leave the school so that they could pick up these girls and go to wherever they would go to and have sex. One doctor who knew me or who I knew and who had connection with the then operating Royal London Hospital, entrance being in Whitechapel Road, told me about that school. He said to me about the Mulberry School that he was involved in carrying out abortions. And he gave me no exact number, But he said hundreds of abortions are being carried out every year. And I am sad to say that doctor said to me that this is happening because of the failure of the parents of the Bangladeshi girls in Mulberry School. That was his identification, because most of the girls were Bangladeshis, because this area around the Mulberry School for girls was in the demography representing the Bangladeshi side. It was mainly Bangladeshi children, Bangladeshi girls. Now, not every single one, of course, was not a Bangladeshi, but not every single one was a Bangladeshi, but the majority or significant numbers of Bangladeshi girls were Bangladeshis. And then a large number, or the large proportion of those girls attending their school, were exposed to these boys waiting outside the school and picking them up. Now, it's a very emotional situation, isn't it? And I had not one, several confrontations with the boys, because what happened was, because it was happening so near New Road, which is where my home was, Richard Street and New Road, you can look at the map. It's just off the bus stop, near the bus stop, which is next to the Tesco shop that is in Commercial Road now, which is to the west of Watney Market. So when I was observing, wherever I was going, I could observe the vicinity and I could see boys and girls coming together. I knew that abortions were looming. So by the time the Taramless Council and the then Inner Learning Education Authority got together and wanted to merge this school with boys, I knew that nightmare situations would happen. Quite apart from the other reasons that Sophia Manikoots actually presents, and she doesn't present most of the arguments, but it is the heading is the correct one. I had no option morally and ethically, and as the designated great grandson of Bed Shah, I had no option but to get involved. As soon as the parent who approached me with that letter, as soon as he put his problems to me, I instantly decided that he couldn't do it. If I advised him to do what was needed, that parent, couldn't do it. So he kind of was taken aback by my answer. So he said to me, what is it that I can do to make the objection to this merger going ahead? So I told him that there is a legal option, there is a constitutional law option, that when such a proposal is on the table and parents are asked to give their opinion, they can make a petition to the Secretary of State, which is in terms of the hierarchy, constitutional law hierarchy in the state. The Secretary of State can consider the application, the petition, and make a decision as to whether to allow the Inner London Education Authority to go ahead with the merger, or to say no, to reject it. And in order to do that, you have to have a successful petition, in the sense that there has to be the requisite number of signatures of genuine parents on the petition. Now, my great-grandfather gave up billions of dollars worth of income and money and whatever. And I could give up what could be compared to hundreds of millions. Imagine the rate at which David Penick charged the Manchester City Football Club when he was retained by them as their, quote, barrister in relation to an appeal against a European regulatory authority. And David Panic charged them, regardless of the quality of his advice, regardless of the outcome of what they were advising, were asking him to advise them on, he would ask them to pay him the daily rate of retainer, £20,000. So, assuming that daily means 8 hours, not the whole 24 hours. So, if we divide 8 hours, divide £20,000 by 8, and what do you get? Let's see the exact amount of the division. So each hour, David Panic was charging £2,500. So if you multiply the number of hours that we spent on foot collecting the thousands of signatures, you can get an idea. Let's see. Me followed by that parent. So let's say in every day, on average, we spend 8 hours, let's say. So 8 multiplied by say 100. So what is it? So 800 hours, let's say, on that calculation, yes? So 800 hours that's 2 million. Let's say 3 months. So if it was £2 million for 3 months, then it would be 12, 8 million pounds a year, which is still way short of the fees that are charged by any constitutional law practitioners from a company, corporation. According to the Financial Times of last week, there were legal firms including one called Kirkland and Ellis, which became the highest earning kind of law firm. And they got billions of pounds worth of business from customers. These customers are mainly big, very big multinationals, conglomerates, corporations. So the quality and the type of the challenge that we had to mount had to be of the highest order. Only because it was of the highest order and it was done in the most competent way, the contents of the petition are very important. So I wrote them. So if a petition is drafted or a legal instrument is drafted by a highly kind of profiled QC, they would command any amount of money that they want. So that's what I did, exactly as the Badshah would do. Didn't charge anyone anything. Photocopying is done by me, and in that shop, so the parent partly bore the cost of photocopy. And then I did the additional work of advocating the opposition to this merger plan in the mainstream media. One mainstream media, ironically, that actually reported this more than once was the then newly launched and later short-lived London Daily News. Now, what was the London Daily News historically, topically? The London Daily News was Robert Maxwell's reply to the owners of the London Evening Standard. Because Robert Maxwell at that time in 1987 was at the peak of his absolute financial kind of wealth, because he had been looting hundreds of millions, in fact billions of pounds worth of the pensioners fund, but nobody was aware of that at that time in 1987. So the London Daily News reported our campaign, as did some others like listing magazines, like I am sure City Limit, which I called City Limits and Time Out, and others. I cannot give a full list because I'm not looking at a list. So let's see what the London Daily News, what months the London Daily News, launched by Robert Maxwell, lasted for. So the London Daily News is described in the Wikipedia entry as a short-lived London newspaper owned by Robert Maxwell. And it says it was published from 24th of February to 23rd of July 1987. It was just the right time in terms of our campaign against the proposed merger of the Marlbury School for Girls with Boys. So it was 24th of February, March, April, May, June, July. So it lasted about 5 months, let's say 5 calendar months. And in those 5 calendar months, I think they reported more than once on our campaign against the Inner London Education Authority about the Marlbury School for Girls. The result was that the impact hit home, because the London Daily News was actually not published once. It was publishing more than once. I mean, that plan was absolutely brilliant in terms of news impact. No doubt about that. No matter how corrupt Maxwell was, we were not about his kind of source of funding of the paper. we were concerned about the appearance of the paper in more than one edition every day. Now, if you were to create similar impact on a news desk of a campaign locally, remember London has got anything between 8 million plus people. And by definition, numerically, so going back to the 1980s, the internet has altered a lot of things. And before that, the fax altered a lot of things. And in 1987, we were not able to use either fax and most certainly not internet. So it had to be a very powerful setup, media operation, part of the campaign that I was running. So I created that very powerful media operation in order to get to the mainstream media networks the progress of our campaign against the inner London education authorities merger plot against the Marlbury School for Girls. And I received responses from various mainstream media in terms of queries, in terms of follow ups, in terms of other things. And I knew quite a few of them anyway. And so we proceeded with the collection of petition, regardless of people saying things to me about my motive. I mean, I have never been motivated by anything, as just as the Ved Shah was not motivated by any kind of greed, any wealth, anything to do with any gift or return for any campaigns. And so we succeeded. The Cabinet Secretary for Education, whose name was Kenneth Baker, whatever his politics otherwise, this was a constitutional law move that I made. He found no reason to allow the Inner London Education Authority to go ahead with the merger. So the school, the Marlbury School for Girls, what is it called now? The Wikipedia entry would be incomplete without that reference, but I don't think the Wikipedia entry would contain that particular battle. And I'll come to that in a minute. So it is called Marlbury School for Girls. And it says High Achieving Successful Girls School. And we shall come to that in a minute. So Marlbury School for Girls, it's an academy status now, and it says it's based in Richard Street, Commercial Road, Shadwell, London E1 2JP. And the motto is stated in that entry: confidence, creativity, leadership, and learning. And it was established in 1965. I'll come to that year again. And the age group is 11 to 19. Very, very, very sensitive age group. So the this campaign to keep the school single sex was done during 1974 to 1999, wasn't it, when Daphne Gould was in place. Now, Daphne Gould I shall come to later in a minute. And there is a reference from the First Lady's entry, First Lady, that is White House, the wife of the president at the time, Barack Obama, dated the 16th of June 2015, that she spoke at the Marlborough School in London at 11:40 a.m. GMT on 16th of June 2015. And here is the transcript of that speech issued by the Office of the First Lady. And it went on until 11:57 a.m. GMT. Well, AM and GMT don't go together, do they? But that's what the item is kind of noting. And I'm posting that one as a link on our Twitter account, Khoodeelaar Twitter account. And this is where the Marlborough School for Girls appears. Now, let's say again, if that school wasn't a single sex school, would that event happen? That was 16th of June 2015. Now, 15th of June 2015, she came there on that date, but she didn't interact just on that date. She interacted after that date, and she interacted more than once. And a group of girls were invited to attend the White House, and they did go there, as did the girls from the other school in London. Elizabeth Garrett Anderson School. And the girls from Elizabeth Garrett Anderson and the girls from the Marlborough School were treated with special recognition by the First Lady in the USA. So you see where it is going from the petition that I organized successfully in 1987 against the Inner London Education Authority and against the local council, the corrupt Tower Hamlets Council. That initiative kept that school in the status of single-sex school. Single-sex status that is being celebrated in principle, not about that particular school, but in principle, by Sophia Moneycoats in the Sunday buying and bribing Boris Johnson graph. Had that school not been a single-sex school, there would be no question of that school being visited by or brought to the attention of Michelle Obama, whose main theme in coming to that school was that it was a girls' school and it was one of the most successful girls' school within the parameters of the various kind of school exam results, etc., etc. If it was a mixed school, and even if it had a higher record or higher achievement record in terms of the Ofsted, Michelle Obama wouldn't be there because her theme was to visit and encourage girls. That was the theme then. And whatever Michelle Obama did otherwise, as part of the kind of being the first lady or whatever, or after the retirement of her husband, is not material. What was material was this school was successful already. From 1987 onwards, it kept on going up. And it became a consistently high performing school within the parameters, as I said. Not maybe according to my definition standards, but in the general kind of scheme of things. So it was selected. And it was selected in the London Borough of Tower Hamlets, which otherwise in 2015, remember 2015? That was June 2015. Remember? June 2015, 16th of June 2015, 11 o'clock, 16th of June 2015. How far is it from 23rd of April 2015? It is less than 2 months. It is less than 2 months since the humiliation inflicted on and suffered by the elected mayor of Tower Hamlets in the name of Tower Hamlets, Lutfur Rahman. On the 23rd of April 2015, less than 2 months before Michelle Obama came to the school. How can you compare the two events? What a contrast. And has anyone noticed the contrast? Did anyone notice the contrast? The contrast is beyond description. This was the mayor, elected mayor, remember, who endorsed him, who aided and abetted the election of the elected mayor. Those who aided him, abetted him, included the likes of Nazir Ahmed. Nazir Ahmed in the last few days has been convicted in a court of Nazir Ahmed has been a convicted pedophile in the last few days. This is the year, calendar year 2022. And Nazir Ahmed has been convicted of several pedophile, that is, sexual offenses against children. This was Nazir Ahmed on the 6th of February 2010, standing at the Brady Center platform. And that was the time, that was the date before the holding of the referendum as to whether to inflict the elected mayor post on the Borough of Tower Hamlets. So he was among the guests, including Keith Sleaze Vaz of Leicester East and Ken Lying-Still Livingston and George Galloway. Now, Galloway was the only one who was from the, quote, local borough at that time on that date, not after the May 2010 election. George Galloway joined this now pervert Nazir Ahmed and the now exposed sleazeball Keith Sleaze Vaz. And together, these four criminals endorsed an anti-democratic, corrupt project to inflict an elected mayor post on the London Borough of Tower Hamlets, on the electors of Tower Hamlets. And I was leading the campaign against them outside the Brady Centre in Hanbury Street on the 6th of February 2010. I paid for the microphone, loudspeaker, and the minicab to transport the microphone and the batteries, etc. I bought the batteries on the way in the minicab. So I paid from my pocket, being the great grandson of the Bed Shah, the philanthropist, the educationist, and the social reformer, and the traveler. He traveled thousands of miles on foot. So when I spoke to the assembled protesters against the corrupt project, I found myself being approached by George Galloway, who was on that date still the quote MP at the expense of the local constituency called Bethnal Green and Bow. And Galloway wrongly assumed that I would give him the microphone so that he could address the people. I was never going to give him the microphone because it was a clear-cut campaign. We were on different sides, opposite sides. And everything I said in that demonstration, everything I said in the thousands and thousands of statements I have made in the last 12 calendar years, everything I've said about Harmless Council has been vindicated. Everything I said about the corrupt elected mayor post has been vindicated. Everything I said about the degeneration of democracy, the degeneration of local democracy in Tower Hamlets that would be added to the already corrupt state of the council has been vindicated. So against that background, I go back to the date 29th of October 2010. 29th of October, if you look at the calendar, is a Friday. And on the 29th of October 2010, I decided to record on the video a few minutes of Lutfur Rahman going about his role, doing his role as the corrupt post holder. Because the election had happened only a week earlier and he had been elected. So as I went to record that, I did that on the Friday, knowing that Lutfur Rahman would be going to the Brick Lane Mosque rather than the East London Mosque. Now, the difference between the Brick Lane Mosque and the East London Mosque is this, in context, that when Andrew Gilligan broadcast on Channel 4 Dispatches, his program titled Britain's Islamic Republic, Andrew Gilligan began the presentation. Of course, it was recorded, but it had been recorded with him standing in front of the East London Mosque in the Whitechapel Road. Now, Brick Lane and Whitechapel Road are kind of divided by or separated by these following streets. Brick Lane ends into Osborne Street, going south from Brick Lane. And Osborne Street meets the center junction of Whitechapel High Street and Whitechapel Road. And then going left, you go into the Whitechapel Road. And up to the junction, you cross one traffic junction. And then before you go into the next traffic junction, there is the East London Mosque on the right side. So it's that far, not very far. But Lutfur Rahman would go to the Brick Lane Mosque. I knew that because he wanted to disguise himself as belonging to one side of the political divide that exists in the Bangladeshi community. One side, that is Brick Lane, the Brick Lane Mosque is dominated by one particular faction in Bangladeshi politics in Bangladesh. And the East London Mosque is kind of affiliated to what you call the Jamaat-e-Islami party. And although Andrew Gilligan talked about the Jamaat-e-Islami, the Islamic Forum Europe, etc., in the broadcast that was aired on the 1st of March 2010, Lutfur Rahman wanted to disguise himself as not belonging to those people, the ones that belong to the Bangladesh-based Jamaat-e-Islami. So he went to the Brick Lane Mosque, and after the prayers, I approached after the prayers. He was coming out of the Brick Lane Mosque into the Brick Lane itself. And as he saw me pointing my camcorder at him, he disguised his actual character again, and he beamed at the camera, and he gave me a straight salute like that. He has given me so many salutes, I cannot count. But all these salutes are completely bogus. I knew that, he knew that, but he kept giving me the salutes. And he kept giving me the salutes. Every time he lied to me, he was still saluting me. So on that day, 29th of October 2010, a Friday in the afternoon, after the Jummah prayers, the Friday prayers, Lutfur Rahman was coming, exiting the East London Mosque through the main entrance into the Brick Lane. And he gave me a salute. And he kept his hand up in the salute position. So when he came on the level in the Brick Lane itself, there was a very short conversation between him and me. My point was that he must meet him as a matter of urgency. Otherwise, the whole community's reputation would be put at risk. It would be destroyed, I said. And it's not me just remembering, it is on the video. And he, not looking displeased or reluctant to speak to me, he has only once done that, and I'll come to that in a minute. He looked, quote, sincere, honest, and genuine, as he said he will do that very soon. And this was witnessed by other people, some of whom can be seen on the video. It is a video, not an audio, so no one can mistake who the people were. So if he had sat down with me as he promised, I would have told him. But he didn't keep his word. And so what happened? On the 23rd of March 2015, the then election commissioner, a licensed law trader, quote QC, barrister QC, called Richard Morey, Mawrey, published his ruling at the end of the petition, at the end of the hearing on the petition that he had received against Lutfur Rahman. and it all is available on the internet, so I don't have to repeat the details. Essentially, what we are doing in this particular part in this edition is comparing Lutfur Rahman's being kicked out on the 23rd of April, 23rd of April, sorry. If I said March, it was a mistake. 23rd of April, 2015, by the election commissioner, Richard Morey. That is Lutfur Rahman being kicked out. Compared with the appearance at the Marlbury School for Girls of the wife of the then in office President of the United States of America. Can you imagine? Less than 2 months after 23rd of April 2015, on the 16th of June 2015, there was Michelle Obama appearing at the Marlbury School, which is not very far from the Brick Lane and the Brick Lane Mosque. And not far really from the Strand where the High Court ruling against Lutfur Rahman was announced. On the 23rd of April 2015, and Michelle Obama's speech can be read. I'm saying this for the first time. Anyone can read that. It's online. The transcript. And the transcript is dated the 16th of June 2015. That was just a year before the Brexit referendum. We'll come to that later. Now, here was the president's wife, the first lady of the United States of America, congratulating these peoples in Tower Hamlets, mostly from Bangladeshi families, Bangladeshi parents' daughters. And she was doing that solely on the basis of Marlbury School girls performing in their schooling examinations at a higher kind of level of performance than any other school in the borough and most of the other schools in the country. Now, if the school didn't exist, that's the first point, as the girls' school, there wouldn't be any performance. So the fact that I correctly foresaw this future or this kind of future recognition of the girls' school shows that my judgment was absolutely perfect. So if Lutfur Rahman had any sense, he would have listened to me. And he would have sat down with me as he promised many times. And he would have been successful in avoiding the political disaster that he was sunk in. And throughout the calendar years that followed the first significant on the record demand to him after his election, I had conversations with him before, but I'm counting only this one in context. The one on the 29th of October 2010, when I said that if he didn't sit down with me, it would be absolute disaster. Now, he obviously didn't understand the moral strength, the ethical strength of what I was saying, because he was obviously under the program of brainwashing, which set him off as a candidate for the post of elected mayor. So he ignored what I said. He didn't keep the promise or promises that he made to listen to me. Now, this is something I can extrapolate and I can say to the viewers who were not there in 1977. When I quizzed the then president of Bangladesh, Ziaur Rahman, in 1977. At the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting that was held in 1977 in London. I came to spend the entire period of the whole week of the conference, Commonwealth Heads of Government Conference. And I asked Ziaur Rahman any number of questions. I don't know exactly how many, but if we divide the elements over the several days, that I would have asked him more than 100 questions, small ones, bits and things. First of all, I didn't encounter any verbal resistance from Ziaur Rahman to my questions. What I did encounter was that he was feeling under pressure from my questioning. That is obvious. But I didn't ask him any questions out of any external kind of connection or pressure. I actually asked him the questions objectively on the evidence of his answers so far, and he performed much better than Ziaur Rahman's predecessor. Well, let's put it this another way. Ziaur Rahman, the president of Bangladesh, in 1977 performed much better than Zulfikar Ali Bhutto, who had been president of Pakistan, the post 1971 president, had performed in the 1960s when I put 9 questions to Zulfikar Ali Bhutto in a continuous row that is one after the other, at the Institute of Engineers in the capital city of Dhaka, now East Pakistan, now become Bangladesh. And at that time in the 60s, it was East Pakistan. So compared to Ziaur Rahman and Zulfikar Ali Bhutto, or Zulfikar Ali Bhutto and Ziaur Rahman, the staying power of Ziaur Rahman in relation to Muhammad Haque's questions, the staying power of Ziaur Rahman was stronger than Zulfikar Ali Bhutto's. I think it did credit to Ziaur Rahman because he could have asked me, like Bhutto kind of retreating from the platform amounted to asking me to stop the questions. Ziaur Rahman could have indicated to me not to keep asking him questions, but he never did. In the case of Morarji Desai, who was answering my question or supposed to answer my question at a media event held at the India House in the Strand, Morarji Desai gave me, as I reported later, a tautological answer. Ziaur Rahman didn't do a tautological anything. He actually spoke straight. Whatever his capacity, whatever his knowledge, he did speak straight to me. And I'm not affiliated to Ziaur Rahman's party or never was affiliated to any party. My quest always, as an investigative operator and observer, has been to get to the truth of a given situation. So Ziaur Rahman did himself very proud indeed in surviving my questions, whereas Zulfikar Ali Bhutto completely discredited himself 10 years earlier when he failed to answer my questions, thus causing me to ask a question after a question after a question. Now, if Lutfur Rahman had any sense, he would have listened to me and he would have avoided being kicked out of the post as a crook, as a corrupt mayor. And it was not because Lutfur Rahman had been targeted by anybody to be found to be a crook, to be exposed as a crook, because the number of votes that he got at the October 2010 first mayoral so-called election suggested that he got the votes of the overwhelming majority of the Bangladeshi voters in the borough. So there was a kind of responsibility on his part to deliver the honesty, the integrity, and the dignity of holding a public post, a post that has been created by a public election. And that is one of the things that I would have told him about. But because he was brainwashed, as Abbasuddin alias Halal told the Labour Party's National Executive Committee, by the people, whoever it was, whether it was the people of the IFE, as Abbasuddin alias Halal claimed, or it was other people based at the East London Muslim Centre or the East London Mosque complex. Whoever was the source of Lutfur Rahman's advice or political strategy, or whoever was kind of brought in by him without any involvement of the IFE or the East London Mosque, say for example, Ken Lying Still Livingston or George Galloway, whoever was in contact with him and whoever he trusted, or Keith Sleaze Vaz, or the convicted pedophile Nazir Ahmed, whoever he sought advice from during his incumbent period from October 2010 until the 23rd of April 2015, when he was ousted on grounds of corruption, whoever he sought the advice from, or whoever he trusted, or rather whoever he preferred to listen to rather than to me, must have given him the wrong advice. Because I'd never allow him to disgrace the community's collective name by staying in the post. I would ask him to resign. Because if he had resigned within the year, that post would not be existing anymore. Because I would give him the constitutional law ways and routes to spell out his reason for resigning in a way that would make it impossible to foist that same post again on the borough. Because I would not just say the present current ills, I would say that the council is unfit for democracy, and I would demand other things. And what would happen in the process if Lutfur Rahman had listened to me? His stature, really political stature, would be enhanced beyond description. And as a result of that, he would be the member of parliament now, not Roshanara. But Lutfur Rahman was too stupid, too ungrateful, and too idiotic, and too brainwashed to see the extent of my generosity, which is beyond measure. I advise people to become holders of position with dignity. I don't want anything from me. That's not the point. So it would enhance Luther Rahman, and he would now be the member of parliament instead of Rushnara Ali. On the 20th of September 2012, at an hour long or so meeting with Luther Rahman in the New Road, underneath a restaurant called Marco's. Now it is no longer there. I told him effectively the same thing. He started the meeting by praising me and saying to me that I, Muhammad Haque, should have been the first MP from the area, the Bangladeshi context, and that I should have been the mayor, not him. I told him that I was not in need of him telling me that. I knew that. But my agenda is not to serve my career in that way. My aim had been, remains to protect the rights of the community, defend the community, and uphold the dignity of the community. Now, Luther Rahman fell and Mulberry School rose. It's not a coincidence. So what I did with the visit that Ziaur Rahman made to the UK a few years after the 1977 meeting that I had with him first time was to enable him to appear at a location in Brick Lane, near Brick Lane, off Brick Lane, and address the Bangladeshi community in the UK from that platform. And as a result of the various detailed strategic plans that we made, Ziaur Rahman has shown on UK mainstream national television, which is something that doesn't happen with visiting kind of foreign heads of states talking to their own communities. But this time, it did happen. To such an extent that the name Brick Lane became kind of part of the legacy of both Ziaur Rahman and our community's work, because he said to the gathering, assembled to listen to him in the vicinity of Brick Lane, that he would name a street in Dhaka, the capital of Bangladesh, after Brick Lane, which he did. Now, that is something that happened instantaneously, let's say. And yet, for almost 100 years before that, so many people, heads of the country, etc., visited the overseas, then Pakistanis and then Bangladeshis. And nothing like that happened. So this was another strategic thing that I did. So look at this. I'm not in any office while I'm doing all of this. What does it prove? It proves that morally and ethically, you organize the campaign, you organize the movement, you mobilize the movement, and you achieve far more tangible results than any holding of a post would enable you in the context. So, for example, the actual events that took place after the still unsolved murders of Watir Ali and Ismat Ali in July 1989 in Brick Lane. there was a demonstration organized by some other people, not me. And I only joined the demonstration at the beginning, starting from Altavali Park. And the demonstration moved through Brick Lane into the Bethnal Green Road on its way to the then headquarters of the Metropolitan Police Bethnal Green area or Tower Hamlets area. And it was based in the Bethnal Green Road. But on the way from Brick Lane to the police station, scuffles took place between some of the demonstrators and the police. And there were several arrests of a number of demonstrators. So the remaining demonstrators were upset about the arrests. And they said, we must protest against the arrests and we must get them released. Now, I was not one of the original organizers of that demonstration, which took place on the 15th of July, 1989. And Ismat Ali and his relation were attacked on the 9th of July, 1989. So, when I wasn't the organizer of the demonstration, I didn't want to take over the running of the demonstration at that stage. But as soon as the scuffles took place and increasing numbers of people are being pushed by the police, it became quite clear physically that nobody was acting as the organizer of the demonstration and nobody was representing the kind of people attacked by the police or arrested by the police. So there was no alternative. In order to keep the demonstration going, in order to maintain the demands of the demonstration, original demonstration, I had to take over. So I took the microphone from somebody, a loudspeaker, and I gave an address. I gave a speech, which essentially included that we shall sit down in the middle of the road, Bethnal Green Road, until the ones that had been arrested were released. This was agreed to by the demonstrators who sat down, and I kept speaking with the demand, continuation of the demand that the people who had been arrested must be released. Now, the people who are not released, but before I go to the next segment, what happened in the meantime was that I looked around and I saw that the people who had organized the demonstration had run away. Literally not visible, let's say. They had disappeared from the body of the demonstration. That made me even more kind of concerned about keeping the demonstration going. So I can continue to speak about the demands. And a point came when the police numbers were inflated. They were kind of added to by the territorial army. We were peacefully sitting in the middle of the Bethnal Green Road. So we didn't cause any kind of reason, or we gave no reason for the police to think that there would be any disorder and violence. We just sat down and we made peaceful demand, which was supported by the people, sat down there around me. So by the time the territorial army arrived, we cannot give the actual number of the people that did arrive. It was the territorial army. It could be 100, it could be more. And what they did, they swiftly physically went about arresting more people. And as the police or the police and the territorial army did that, the people in the demonstration became disorganized, unsettled, uncertain, and there was no plan. There was no plan that there was no expectation of the territorial army arriving. So therefore, there was no plan. We had actually thought that we'd finish the demonstration after a few more minutes because the police were not releasing the people and the road was being blocked, and we knew that. And I was going to stop the demonstration, sit down demonstration, say another 10 minutes. But before that could happen, the territorial army came and they surrounded the people and they started arresting people. So what happened was that this is the number which we realized after we saw the list, but it could be more. Some people may have been hassled, picked up, and then let go. Essentially, it was about 40 people, almost all of them Bangladeshis. Could be one or two not Bangladeshi, but I reckon it was about 40, all of them Bangladeshis. Mainly young people. One or two may be over 40, but the majority were under 40 or under 30. And that those people who had got arrested needed defending. Who defended them? How many licensed law traders were trading in the name of the Bangladeshi community, were trading among Bangladeshi clients in Tower Hamlets in East London or from Tower Hamlets and across the UK from bases in Tower Hamlets? How many licensed law traders were doing business by capitalizing on the fact that they were based in Tower Hamlets and they were Bangladeshis? How many? Of course, there is no number that is known as being Bangladeshi licensed law traders, or some of them operating with one licensed law trader, employing others, posing as licensed law traders, sole cheaters. Essentially, in July 1989, that is when it all happened. There was no licensed law trader that came forward. There was no licensed law trader that came forward to do the campaign to get the charges dropped against these 40 accused. So who did the campaign to get the charges dropped or to have the charges dropped? I did that. And it was not part of my plan. It was nothing to do with my plan, nothing to do with my kind of other work. But this is what I had to do. So what happened? There was a procedural series of appearances in the local magistrates court, like Thames Magistrates Court, by the arrestees. And then there were further hearings and appearances, including appearance in the Wales Street Magistrates Court, Horse Ferry Road Magistrates Court. And the campaign to get all the charges dropped against them went on for nearly 2 years. I funded them. I mobilized myself, and I did it. I got all the charges dropped. If anyone watching this disagrees with the fact that I'm asserting, you are most welcome to send me a direct message giving the actual event. Say if there was an acquittal, give me the acquittal. If there was a conviction, give me the conviction date and the place where the conviction took place, like Wells Street Magistrates Court or Horseferry Road Magistrates Court. But the amazing thing is that I had to stage solo performances as claimed by an actor in the kind of South Indian film called Inspector Vijay. Inspector Vijay's boss man claimed solo performance after Inspector Vijay rescued a kidnapped girl. And the credit was claimed by his boss, who had nothing to do with it. In fact, his boss had discouraged Inspector Vijay from getting involved in the rescue of the kidnapped girl. Now, I did solo performance in real life. Outside the Wells Street Court, I stood there with a banner, all of my own, because nobody else from Tower Hamlets turned up there. Think about that. And the same thing I did outside the Horseferry Road Magistrates Court several days. There was one person, the minicab driver that I had used to travel to Horseferry Road Magistrates Court from Tower Hamlets. The minicab driver held the one end of the placard, banner, not placard, one end of the banner, and I held the other end of the banner. And this was shown on BBC London News. When it was shown on BBC London News, certain parties, certain individuals in Tower Hamlets thought they would be able to feature in the demonstrations if they turned up. So they turned up. And the next one, which wasn't covered by the BBC, amazingly. It wasn't anything to do with me, but the BBC didn't cover that one, as far as I remember. Essentially, what I'm saying is the Lutfur Rahman should have listened to me. And Lutfur Rahman should never have lied to me. But he didn't listen to me and he lied to me. He didn't keep his promise. Now, on the one single occasion that he actually didn't look pleased while talking to me was when he organized a Ramadan Iftari at the Water Lily building in my land during 2013. And he spoke to me in a disrespectful way when I told him that I didn't go there to have a meal with his lot. I went there to observe. And he said something, I don't remember the exact words, but he said something disrespectful. That was in 2013. Now, when Lutfur Rahman spoke disrespectfully, I knew that he was out of control. That is to say, what they say, it all got into his head that he was the, quote, incumbent as the mayor. So when he did that, when he behaved in that disrespectful way, I concluded that he was on the way out in a disgraceful way, I thought. And everything that has come out later about what he was up to during the period of, let's say, the calendar years 2010 to up to the 23rd of April 2015, it confirms everything that has come out, confirms what I suspected would happen, but I didn't know literally chapter and verse of everything that was happening. But I knew significant amounts of the evidence that Lutfur Rahman was misbehaving, seriously misbehaving corruptly and offensively and anti-democratically and antisocially in that post. So that was the conclusion during the month of Ramadan, let's say, that was held in 2013, the year before the 2014 kind of election, because he got into trouble after allegations about his misconduct were made in the petition submitted in June 2014. So, what happened at the hearing that took place as a result of the petition filed in June 2014 was that extensive references and allegations against Lutfur Rahman were made during the hearing. Now, if he sat down with me and respectfully, truthfully listened to me at any time between 29th of October 2010 and sometime in February, I think, 2014, he would have avoided putting the reputation of the Bangladeshi community and by extension reputation of the Muslims and by extension reputation of the other people from other backgrounds in Africa and Asia on the line, which he did. The number of criminality that were perpetrated with the Lutfur Rahman being in post as mayor, the number of criminality, criminal acts and abuse and corruption exceeds anything that could be broadcast here, because every item of corruption, criminality, dishonesty, fraud and abuse has to be explained so that the viewer viewing this, watching this, can understand the facts of what is being kind of discussed. And none of the corruption, none of the criminality, none of the abuses was demanded by the Bangladeshi population or the Bangladeshi electors, let alone by the electors from other backgrounds, other ethnic backgrounds or faith backgrounds or whatever. Now, what do I have to be? For somebody like Lutfur Rahman to listen to me morally and ethically when I'm offering this. Of course, on a biological kind of scale, I'm another human being. But if Lutfur Rahman told the truth on the 20th of September 2012 that I should have been the first MP, I should have been the mayor, nobody could compare with me, and all the rest. If that is a reflection of what he actually believed truthfully, then what stopped him from sitting down with me and listening to me? I can say that if that is the truth, that he actually believed in my kind of political and social and ethical competence and suitability, then somebody else must have stopped him sitting down and listening to me. Who was it? Who was it that could have influenced Lutfur Rahman from listening to me? And who was it that has remained silent about Lutfur Rahman's complete and absolute humiliation? Where is the source of the advice that he was given or he was made to follow? This is now calendar year 6th, I think. 2015 is 1, 2016 is 2, 2016, 17 is 3, 18 is 4, 19 is 5, 20 is 6, 21 One is 7, and this is 8th calendar year since Lutfur Rahman was kicked out. And as far as I can see, there is no record of anyone from any place, any part of the London Borough of Tower Hamlets, telling anybody, including the public, making a statement about what Lutfur Rahman did as the holder of the corrupt post of mayor. Of course, Lutfur Rahman himself has made several applications. He has made several applications in the High Court, Queen's Bench Division. Let's see where he applied. So he applied. He made several applications, and his applications are obviously dated after his being ousted. Those are the ones that I'm looking for. So one is, let's say, one is dated 6th of August 2015. Well, this is an application by the petitioners about seeking the money, judgment debt, and all the rest of it. So this is not one about Lutfur Rahman challenging the judgment or the ruling. And there is no evidence. There is no evidence that Lutfur Rahman has challenged the legality or the legal basis or the evidence on which he was kicked out of the post of elected mayor. And there has been no announcement by the courts in favor of Lutfur Rahman on anything since that specific ruling by Richard Morey, dated the 23rd of April 2015. So my question is, on what basis did he kind of think that he would be able to stay in the post, or had he expected to be exonerated as against the petitioner's claims against him? Who advised him? I remember that a number of people who appeared to be his supporters in the Bangladeshi community in Tower Hamlets, one of them told me very boldly that the petition is a joke. The petition of June 2014 against Lutfur Rahman was a joke. Now, I had not asked him that question as to how things were going as a joke. I was not chatting with him. I was actually checking with him because he was one of those who appeared to be very closely kind of supportive of Lutfur Rahman. So I wanted the basic facts of how things were going in that context. So this individual said it was a joke. And he made derogatory comments about one of the petitioners. Now that response suggested to me that Lutfur Rahman himself was circulating the line that these people are jokes and that he would be declared innocent of the charges that the petitioners had included as the reason for their petition against him. All of this could have been avoided had Lutfur Rahman behaved according to my advice and had he listened to me truthfully. Many people watching him physically approached me while I was sitting in the kind of public gallery, so-called, in the Tower Council, on the number of occasions that I did have to attend in order to collect the evidence. People would remember that Lutfur Rahman would come out of his seat as chair of the so-called cabinet and kind of give me a salute then and give me a salute as he approached me, and then appeared to be saying things to me that were obliging, respectfully. That was the body language. But everything he said to me turned out to be a lie. And I told him that he was lying. How did I tell him? Because his kind of contact person was Alibor Chaudhry. And I had telephone conversations with Alibor Chaudhry, as well as having regular texts and emails. Alibor Chaudhry never ever told me that Lutfur was not listening to me. Alibor Chaudhry never said that. Alibor Chaudhry always told me on the telephone and on the record, that email, etc. And when face to face with me personally, that happened rarely, but that did happen as well. Alibor Chaudhry said to me the following, that brother Lutfur has the highest amount of respect for you. And Lutfur Bhai is doing his best on the issues that you have raised. Let's summarize the two things. Lutfur was lying all the time. And Lutfur is not a lawyer. By no way is he a lawyer. I'm a lawyer. Based on legal knowledge and legal evidence, and I have been advocating on constitutional law and related issues since way before Lutfur was biologically born. And my advocacy has been vindicated every time. So Lutfur Rahman is lying through his teeth. As I said, whoever advised him to lie to me, I cannot name because he didn't give me a name as to who was advising him. But he lied to me. And he avoided the advice I was still giving him. And when the last meeting held in the town hall about all the outstanding issues and lies the council had been perpetrating, Lutfur Rahman held the meeting not with any Tower Hamlets Council employee present. He had a man from the channel S television called Jubair Ahmed. And he had somebody else, not from the council, called Abu Tahir. He's not a council employee or anything, in the council, that is. And he had some other people who were not employees of the council, and the meeting was not being openly recorded. And all of the disaster that Lutfur Rahman has caused is down to every single thing he did dishonestly. So we shall come to an end of this broadcast at this time, 2023 hours GMT, which is just over 3 hours, I think. We shall check the length of this broadcast.